Okay, so start off by drawing and draw it big enough because we're going to fill in information on it. Like I'm not talking over 3 pages. Just big enough. Okay, so ons gaan weer ons kartesiese vlak teken. Julle weet nou al daai is 0 grade of 360 grade. 90 grade kom hier bo. 180 grade. 270 grade en vul sommer so lank vir jou kwadrante ook in. Okay, now I need you guys to start thinking in terms of physical angles, né? So sê nou maar, moet nou nie dit alles inteken nie. Okay, ontspan, né? Sê nou maar ek teken hier 'n lyn, né? En daai is 'n hoek. Okay. Hoe groot gaan daai hoekie wees? Jy hoef nie vir my presies te sê nie, but what type of an angle will that be? An acute angle, né? Dit gaan 'n hoek wees wat tussen 0 en 90 grade lê. Okay. So in the first quadrant, we are always working with just an acute angle on its own. Nie worry nie, ons kom by hulle almal uit, 'n skerp hoek. Okay. If I draw one here, so, watter soort hoek is dit? Obtuse, 'n stomphoek, né? Okay. But we are looking at this part. Okay? So, hoe kry ek daai hoek? You're going to say 180 minus an acute angle. Do you agree? Né? As ons werk met 'n stomphoek, sê nou maar dit is 140. Né? Dan is dit mos 180 minus 40. 40 is mos 'n skerp hoek. So let's say we're working with 140. Then you're saying you get that by saying 180 minus 40. So working back from the straight line. Okay, so in die tweede kwadrant gaan ons werk met 180 grade minus 'n skerp hoek. I'm only working on the horizontal. I'm not looking at the vertical. So how do you think working from 180 will I get the size of this angle? 180 plus an acute angle. Nee? Dink gou mooi, sê nou maar ek sê 200 grade. Stem julle saam 200 grade lê in hierdie kwadrant. How can I get that in terms of an acute angle? I can say 180 plus 20. Do you agree? And that 20 will always be an acute angle. So we want to go and define everything in terms of the horizontal line plus or minus an acute angle. Okay, are you seeing where we're heading? It's okay if you don't, we're still going to do a few more of these. Like that. Okay, and for the last one, if let's say I have an angle of 300 degrees, hoe kan ek hom kry in terme van daai reguit as plus of minus skerp hoek? I'm going to give you a hint to work with 360. 360 degrees minus an acute angle. Okay. going to take you some time, but soon you will know all of those off by heart. Okay. Good. And I'm just going to fill in this, but this is a new news. The quadrants where we have positive and negative values. Okay, now, I want you all to take out your calculator. Time to experiment. Exciting. Me? Well, I aim to please. Okay. Tik op my in die sin van 30 grade. What do you get? Aha. Now, let's start the magic. Tik op my in die sin van 150 grade. What? Okay, in what quadrant will you find 150? Quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? 2. Okay. How can I define 150 in terms of 180 minus something? Because we're in the second quadrant, so we want to work with 180 minus something. 180 minus wat geef my 150? Ooh, we're starting to sense a pattern here. Okay, now it's going to get wild. Are you ready? Hou vas jou ponytail, behalwe as jy vir die eerste span speel. Type that in. It's not off. Minus half. Hoekom? Want in watse kwadrant werk ons? We're in the third quadrant. What is sine in the third quadrant? Nee man. Maak jy lelike streepies? How can I write 210 in terms of 180 plus something? Want onthou ons is in die derde kwadrant, né? 180 grade plus the plot thickens. Okay. En die laaste ene, quick maths, gaan sin van 330 wees. Wat dink julle gaan sy teken wees? What do you think the sign will be? Negative. Why? Because sine is negative in the third quadrant. So hy gaan wees negatief, en jy kan hom gaan uitwerk, dis 'n half, want daai ene kan ons skryf as 360 grade minus 30. So because all of them have that acute angle in common, right? Elke een van daai hoeke wat ek vir jou gegee het, kan ons skryf in terme van 30 grade. Almal van hulle kan ons skryf in terme van dieselfde skerphoek. We can go and rewrite all of them in terms of the same acute angle. They will all give you the same numerical value. So the numerical value will be a constant. Sien julle, hulle almal het 'n half. But the quadrant that I'm working in determines the sign. Okay. So sê nou maar, dit was nou nie die hoek 30 gewees nie, maar sê nou maar, ons het gewerk met tan in daai 4 kwadrante. Tan, en ek gee vir jou hoeke wat hulle almal presies dieselfde is, né? Wat sal sy teken wees in die eerste kwadrant? So if I'm working with tan and I'm working in the first quadrant, what will the sign be of my answer? Positive. In the second quadrant? Negative. In the third quadrant? Positive. Woo, maak julle my ook teen mekaar. Tan is positive in the third quadrant. In the fourth quadrant? Negative. But the number, the physical number, will be the same for all four. Because I can write them all in terms of the same acute angle. Woo! Minor decimal. Okay. But first, we are going to work with a variable. So our acute angle is first going to be only x or theta. So ons gaan nou eers bietjie hierdie kwadrante ding uitsorteer en later gaan ons uitkom by hoeke. Okay, goed. So, voorbeeld 1. Julle gaan sien hierdie word later tweede natuur. Ja. Dink so, ek het nou vir Sny gaan se vra vir my te laat weet, kyk hier. Waaroor skryf die kinders alles? Maar ek hoor vandag te weer, dan sal ek vir julle laat weet. Okay, so jumping back to these halves we have here. Do you agree that this one has the same value as sine of 30 degrees? No? And this one has the same value as negative sine of 30 degrees. No? And this one has the same value as negative sine of 30 degrees. So wat ons gaan doen, is ons gaan elke een van die funksies gaan skryf in terme van net x. We're going to throw away the 180 plus or minus. We're going to throw away the 360 minus. And we're going to be left with just a function in terms of an acute angle. En al waarvoor ons die 180 plus of minus of die 360 minus gaan gebruik, is om vir ons te sê in watse kwadrant ek werk and therefore what the sign will be. So I'm going to throw away the 180 plus or minus and I'm going to throw away the 360 minus. I'm going to be left with just a function with an acute angle. But I'm only going to use those other parts that I'm going to throw away now to determine in which quadrant I am and therefore what the sign of that function will be in that quadrant. Because do you agree that I can go and throw them away? You get the same value, né? So as ek hierdie almal gaan weggooi. Sien julle? En ek sit net met die skerphoeke. Then I get the same answer when I type it into my calculator. Do you agree? But I still need the 180 plus and minus or the 360 minus to say I am in quadrant 1, 2, 3 or 4 now and therefore this function will be either positive or negative. Okay, so let's look at this one. Identify the quadrant of 180 plus. Yeah? Quadrant 3, right? 180 plus is in quadrant 3. With what function am I working with there? Cos. What is the sign of cos in quadrant 3? Negative. So that whole thing I can now write as negative cos x. Once again, I'm throwing away the 180 plus or minus. I'm only using it to determine the quadrant. And the quadrant determines the sign. So ons gaan en gesê, dis in kwadrant 3. Né? En in kwadrant 3 is cos negatief. And then I can throw away the rest and just say the sign will be negative, but it will be in terms of only an acute